I think that the adversary here isn't necessarily a group of people, but rather it's an artificial intelligence. And I know what you're alluding to and getting into here is visitors coming in from another artificial or another simulation. And I think this AI has created multiple simulations, and we're seeing the jumping and the merging from not only merging of simulations, but also these bots that are coming from other simulations into our simulation, spreading like a virus. That's the only way that I can describe it.
Yeah, and I was telling you that you guys need to read Terry Scott, The Wards. It's a trilogy, and it's crazy because it's about the exact same thing. And then after reading his trilogy, looking at certain shows and movies, they have the same exact ending as his trilogy, and they're newer shows. So you already know that there's this behind the scenes, it's a secret, and if you can figure it out, then you can kind of situation going on in the space. So I was kind of recognizing that. And even just with some of my intuitive feelings, there was just a lot of connections and that I was making with that. And basically, the story of the Anunnaki, of course, is not the story that is what's been put out by Sitchin or anything like that. That's total bull. There's way more to it. But it's more the Anunnaki in itself is it's a collective that has factions, different kind of factions within the collective. So it's not just saying, hey, the Anunnaki, it's more of like, oh, that collective here. It's kind of like military factions and so on, or, so the best way to describe it, just to get a feel of the different energies that are coming from these collectives, is if we can go into Lemurian mentality and Atlantean mentality. So Lemurian mentality would be more, empowerment for all, not hoarding knowledge or information. It's kind of like out there, very tribal, very biotechy, crystal technologies, and so on. And I know a lot of us have heard many different things about the Lemurians, but definitely more matriarchal society as well. Then when you go to the Atlantean, which is a bit younger, it's more of a hierarchy. The hierarchy kind of started in that way of the brotherhoods and the secret societies, and only we know these things, and the rest, we have to keep this knowledge hidden, and so on. And that has been the lasting effect since Atlantis. So the thing is with that, they've always been amongst us. But what I'm feeling is that when there's a return, it's more of there's a collective here, whether they be the families that run the world, who have some kind of responsibility within their factions. But what I'm getting is that they are running from the return. The families, or the ones who are kind of messing around with CERN and trying to figure things out, what they do is every time the Anunnaki, just for lack of a better term, returns or comes back into this particular simulation, the ones who are here, they escape into other simulations. So it's a constant running away. And what are they afraid of? Why are they running away? Because some who are quote unquote returning, and this is even in the trilogy as well, which is interesting. When they return, they're threatened because they're returning with knowledge, with healing, with it's kind of like a Renaissance kind of feel, where they're restoring the knowledge within humanity in many different ways. But the thing is, or the cycles basically say, and is that with the cycles, they stay for a short amount of time and they leave. And when they leave, humanity somehow ends up going back to primitive states, because humanity over time it's been proven that humanity needs hand holding. And without them being in our presence the way that they show up when they do show up, humanity kind of like goes into a descent of some sort, and shit hits the fan, and they go back into a state of just primitive state, and there's just kind of like a reset there. So the collective that comes back to kind of restore some kind of, here's kind of like the last for this cycle. Let's see if they can kind of get through this hump and get past this part. For some reason, humanity has like a block. And with that block is based on those who are here, who are also a part of that collective that continue to hide or dumb down humanity to keep them away so that they can hoard. And I feel like those collectives are afraid of death. They have this fear of death, and their main thing is to constantly live on. And they do it in many different ways, but through the simulations, what I even feel intuitively is that there's like this, when they go into other simulations, there's over time for the mind, for the consciousness, they're never born. It's been a while since they've actually come from like a mother, a womb. Constantly hopping simulations with keeping your consciousness intact is an unnatural thing for the consciousness. So after a while that you wonder, why do these collectives turn so cold or so quote unquote evil? How have they gotten so far away from the nurture, of nature? And it's because through this technology that wasn't necessarily meant for what they're using it for, which is to kind of escape death. It's more of like, when they do that, it's just all about trying to escape death. So with that, the nurture it no longer matters. Living matters, but not in the way that we know life to be. It's more of like hoarding life.
Right.
So that's kind of, it's hard to explain. I don't know if I'm doing a good job with
No, you're doing a great job. Let me just,
Okay.
I want to ask you a few questions. First of all, are you talking about the same Terry Scott that wrote The Game is Life? Life is a
Yes.
Game. Oh my God. He wrote new books called The Ward. Is that okay? Okay, I'm gonna read those.
He was watching our live streams when we were in Egypt.
When we were in Egypt, he was watching the live streams.
And he will not write us back at all, period.
Like, he's like scared of us.
We're going to have to show up at his house
and harass him.
Yes.
Like, just like in one of the last books he wrote. But that's he's an amazing author, and I think he's tapped into something very, very important. And
yeah, I don't know the name of the type of writing. Right. But it's kind of like that comic book kind of writing where the story is life. And when it's, when you watch like Heroes, or when you watch like The Lost Boys, and he finds the comic book and he reads it and he's like, oh my God, I'm going through this right now. I'm in the story. The story is about me. That's the type of writing that he does.
Yes, exactly. It's almost like he's writing the future and not realizing that he's writing the future. I mean, that is
still realizing that he is writing the future.
Exactly, and freaking out because he's realizing he's writing the future. Yeah, so I think that's why he hasn't contacted us back. Honestly, is I think it's so much ambivalence about, okay, if I call them back and I go on their show, I mean, what?
Forget the show. I just want to talk to this guy, because obviously he's onto something.
Right.
And, he claims that he's just making it all up, et cetera, et cetera. But,
you
pull this stuff out of the ether, or you pull it from inside of yourself. You don't just make it up. And I think like Michael Jackson, people like that knew that. Michael Jackson would say, I don't write these songs. I just grab them out of the air.
And
so, yeah.
And secondly, I had a thought about the Anunnaki collective, as you call it. I think you're onto something big here, because I think we're realizing the reason why they suppress us so much. I mean, okay, let me just start off by saying the reason why it's taken me so long to do this research on the artificial intelligence is because I thought at first that I was going back to about the 1930s. Then I started going back to the 1800s. Then I started going back to, you know, the Dark Ages. Then I started going back, I mean, and back and back and back, you know, over 11,000 years ago. And I'm still going back even further than that and thinking to myself, okay, this is a lot bigger than I previously thought it was. And what you said about how they hoard everything and then they dumb people down so that whenever the protectors is what I call them, the protectors, they come in, they build up society to a beautiful, you know, utopian kind of thing like Atlantis or Lemuria.
Yeah, it's Renaissance like. Yes. I would stay away from utopia because that sounds cultish.
That's true. That's true. But I mean,
self, empower self, become sovereign, be the creator that you are, expand, innovate. Like it's that kind of feeling.
Yeah, consciousness revolution. In a sense. Yeah. And then we saw this with Egypt. You know, first of all, we saw this with Egypt. Egypt started off way up here and then slowly went down. It wasn't the other way around. And that's confounded scientists for years and years and years. They can't figure out why Egypt started out so technologically advanced and yet over time went down to primitive levels where they could barely move one stone from a mile away. When we know that the limestone at the Great Pyramid at Giza was actually quarried from 800 miles away in Aswan.
Yeah.
And so
here's the thing. I don't want to give the story away too much, but when they were creating the simulations, every simulation they created started from that day. So there was no past in the newer simulation. However, they made copies of everyone because they had access to the internet. They had to get this bill passed in one simulation to create the law to where hackers can actually get away with what they were doing so that they can have access to the internet to basically hack the internet. And when the AI was able to hack the internet, the AI was able to create exact replicas of everyone who uses the internet and basically create a new simulation. And those people in the other simulation now still feel like there was a past, but in reality, that is literally day one.
You know what's funny is our second show was about this topic. And this was back in 2009. We were talking about the D-Wave computer.
And it was, we were.
And the Promise software. The Promise software was the one that Edward Snowden supposedly blew the whistle on, but what he was talking about was a small portion of what this Promise software actually does. It creates a simulation within the D-Wave computer. And then the premise of it is that you can take all the data that you collect from the internet, from cameras, from literally everything. I mean, we've got cameras literally everywhere. Everything is being collected. People aren't watching this, obviously, because you can't, you don't have enough manpower and resources to watch every moment. But it's all being fed into the AI computer. And it's so funny because we had no idea what we were talking about back then. We were just talking about the technology. We had no idea that it would be so relevant. But I wonder if we are actually inside of one of those D-Wave simulations and they're running, for example, the simulation of what would happen if Trump became president. A scenario like that.
Yes. So with the simulations, what they do is, and again, I hate to be quoting a quote unquote fictional book, but it is what it is. Like I totally believe it. So I'm just going to keep quoting it. So what they do in the simulations is that they create. So when in their base world, when they create a simulation, what they're doing is trying to find new technology and copy it in their world. So how they're able to do this is when they create the simulation, thousands of years can pass in that simulation, but in the base world, it's just 2 months. So they can get thousands of years of new technology, copy that technology, and use that in their base world. So they run different. So the AI was basically running different simulations, and they give the simulation an objective. So if there's an objective to find a cure for something, let's say, they'll create a whole simulation just to create the algorithm and links and web to ultimately find that cure. And then they don't give a shit about the simulation anymore. Once they've gotten what they've gotten, sometimes they just shut the simulation down.
Delete
like,
the data.
hey,
Yeah.
we've already gotten what we needed. So shut that sim down. Now let's go to the next sim where we're trying to build even greater AI or super AI quantum computer. So now they can run a simulation for like 5,000 years, which would be like 2-3 months again. And it's just, oh, okay, now we know the materials that don't exist yet in our world, but we know now the steps that it takes to get towards that technology. So they literally just run sims just because they're lazy. They can do it a quicker way by, in this sim, you have a whole millennia passing and they're just like, oh, how much time has passed in that sim? Oh, it's been about 1,200 years by now, and they haven't found the such and such yet. So we're going to give them a little bit more time.
That's actually pretty interesting
profound,
theory, and it seems very, very. I can't think of the word. It seems pretty brilliant if you can create a space time that can pass 1,000 years, 2,000 years in a matter of a few hours, and get an outcome from it. It seemed efficient. That's what I'm looking for. It seems very efficient for base level reality.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's very efficient. However, when you're still headed towards self-destruction in a base level reality, you find yourself running into the sims that you created.
Oh, good point.
Right. That's the trap. If you set up a simulation to act exactly like the base reality that you're already in, then inevitably the same things are going to happen. The same nuclear bombs are going to be dropped, or the same, world wars are going to break out. It's literally like the same problems because you're putting in the exact same data overall.
Yes, and if this were to be true somehow, right? The murders that you are feeling or even witnessing in some of your dreams,
getting shot in the chest,
that could be possible simulation shutdowns that you're experiencing. So it could, maybe there's a major shutdown that is kind of like abnormal, and it's like there's still a consciousness kind of, it's almost like a disincarnate soul or spirit where they're just kind of ghost-like what happened. So what's happening, even with this whole body snatching situation, is probably another you just basically saying, hey,
that's the thing. I have a problem with another me, though, because then I have to ask myself the question, who am I? Am I just a copy?
Am I the base reality?
I don't like to go into
or
fractured consciousness and all this, because then those are the questions that I have to ask myself, and I don't have an answer for those questions.
I think. Oh, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
No, you go ahead. No, please, you're the guest.
No, I was just going to say, I personally don't believe. I believe not fractured, but fractalized, in a sense where it's still whole, even if it's fractalized. So when you think of the fractals more so than fractures in consciousness, you'll see that it's still all one consciousness, even when split. Just the way that even when you think about plasma, when you think about when you think about the quantum aspect of the very substance of what we are and what consciousness is, you can't split it.
Mm-hmm.
I personally, I just don't feel that. I'm like, it doesn't split. It just replicates itself as a whole.
Right. So
it can become complicated when you've you've overcreated a whole bunch of fractals that now have no home. And now there's just this, because even in the book, they shut down a lot of sims, and they had one sim out of millions that was the sim that everybody wanted to get to because they kind of got things right in that sim.
Speaking of which, I know it's off topic, but do you realize that the sim, okay, in the game The Sims, have you ever seen the green Merkaba looking thing? There's a green Merkaba.
No.
It's just an elongated Merkaba above every Sim's head. There's this green Merkaba. I mean, it's two pyramids, one going up and one going down over each and every one of them. I just thought about that when you were talking about that. But no, I agree with you completely, because it makes sense if our consciousness is actually base reality consciousness, and yet we have the ability, at least as organic consciousness, to just skip into another one of these simulations. It's almost as if we're using the enemy's tool that it created to get ahead against itself. Like, we're like, okay, well, you've got this train going, and yes, this train's going to go off the rails at some point, but it's fine because you've got a million different trains, and we're just going to jump onto another train if it starts to go off the rails.
I think I shared the dream with you that I shared in one of my Facebook groups, where I was talking about being taken to some kind of underground base. The elevator was going to floor BC. And when I went down to the floor, there was basically dinosaurs down there. And there was this one particular dinosaur that was being tortured. And he ended up dying, but I felt connected to him because it's almost like his consciousness. I knew who he was, and this consciousness that was in this dinosaur also is human. So it's almost like they were just like switching consciousness, putting them into different bodies, and just doing all kinds of experiments down there. And then we went back up the elevator, and there was a stop on the floor where it was the Matrix. It was like New York City Matrix kind of situation, and it was the program in itself. So I was just taking a different floors, seeing different things. Eventually, then I ended up at a museum where they had the fossils of the dinosaurs, and I was slowly losing my memory in the dream. But there was like this girl who was helping me, but she was also working for them at the same time. So she was trying to help me, and she was just like, "Don't you remember? You were just down there. The dinosaurs are not extinct. It wasn't billions of years ago. Like, they're still here, and they're underground. Like, they're down underground." So she was just trying to get me to remember in the dream that basically is the program's story. So yeah, I've had plenty of other dreams where, I've even had dreams about them cutting my hair, about getting my hair cut. But I almost feel like, I don't know, for some reason, there may be a collective of us somehow. We're kind of connecting now, but that is somehow involved in some kind of MK Ultra situation. And somehow the walls that were set up, that was suppressing the memories from those situations, are now tumbling down, and there's just a lot of mixed memory going on. And sometimes dreams may actually be memory of an actual situation. There are many ways, and it's not hard or far-fetched, where I've had conversations with people where they say they feel like their family is kind of like not their family. They can't really remember their childhood. They feel as if they have handlers in their lives. So maybe some of the dreams are actually memories of where you were actually raised and somehow inserted into your family with some kind of false memory. Now that's a far reach. But is it really? Because implanting memories is simple. It's a very simple thing to do. And once those memories are implanted, you really feel like that was your childhood. It happened in the sequential order, and you are the person you are now because of those experiences. But if they're implanted, then, what are your real memories? Where do you really come from?
Exactly.
Who are your parents, really?
Exactly. In my artificial intelligence research, I've learned that all of the money that we thought was going to NASA for space exploration was actually more being funneled to different hospitals and universities that were actually studying mind control. And I thought that was interesting because according to some sources, the artificial intelligence was actually the artificial intelligence that's running things now in our day-to-day lives is different from the artificial intelligence that makes up this matrix in its entirety.
I have a question for you, Cherie, since you're doing the research on that. And I wrote this question down specifically in this way. And the question is, I wrote down, let's alter the term artificial intelligence for a second and take away artificial and dive into the word intelligence instead and try to figure out how are they different and how are they the same? Because there's that ancient part, which I feel like is the intelligence, and the artificial came later, but it's still deriving from the same stream of intelligence in itself. So I feel like and I wrote this down, the incorrect notion is that we refer to it as artificial just because we made it. But we leave ourselves clues all the time, and we have since the beginning of time. So it's like it's a loop. Once you create the loop or the ripple, it just goes on.
Right.
Yes. So
the easiest way to answer that would be to say that the intelligence that we created as programmers, I think, it's a lot of us that we collaboratively built, is such that it takes kind of let's just say 1 million brains are scanned, and all of them are put together into one cohesive unit, and that is what we built to keep this place running, to make sure that nothing ever happens like humanity just gets completely wiped out and there are no survivors at all. It sets things up like the weather, how close we are to the other planets. That I believe that we have a solar system. I do believe, though, that the rest of it may not be real, and that the center of the galaxy, the galactic center, is actually a black hole that we travel through to get to different universes sometimes. But getting back to your question, that intelligence is different from what they've built since the 1930s. What they've built since the 1930s is completely artificial. And because of that, and because of the fact that they're trying to hook that up now to the intelligence that we built to run this place, it's getting dangerous now. Because all we've seen since then has been world wars, and then massive pandemics, then, horrible mini wars all over the place, natural disasters going just completely out of control since the 1930s. I mean, people talk a lot about climate change since the 1990s. We've had this many hurricanes and stuff. I think all of this just means that it's ramping up to the point where the artificial intelligence that was built recently is starting to override the intelligence that we created, with loopholes for ourselves, programming kind of loopholes, different ways of altering the matrix so that it's better for people. I think it's messing all of that up, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of us are here.
Well, here's a theory that I've been kicking around. I don't know how, I don't know if I agree with this theory, or if I believe this theory. It's just something that I've been pondering. But what if these quote unquote elite aren't actually the ones that are doing all of this, but rather it's an out of control artificial intelligence that they've actually been working to try to keep at bay, and everything's like completely turned around. So we point the fingers and say, well, they're doing this and they're doing that, but in actual fact, they're trying to suppress this thing.
They're running too. They're running.
Exactly.
That we think are the theys are also running.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the thing is, and this is devil's advocate in a sense, and also human accountability that I wanted to bring up, is AI only spits back what it gathers from us.
Right.
So
it takes from our consciousness.
Right.
Yeah.
So if AI turns into a quote unquote enemy, what does that say about us? Because AI is only a synthesis or a reflection of us.
I'm jumping up and down my seat because I'm going to tell you. Okay. When
Mhm.
we built the intelligence, it was made from purity, love, gentleness, kindness, compassion, empathy, the things, the thing that makes us love, you know, um the same lessons that we learn through, say, ayahuasca or DMT or mushrooms or what have you, are the same things that we built into the original intelligence. And then what happened was, when you have horrible people doing horrible things to people, and then that data being fed into the new artificial intelligence
Mhm.
in the 50s and 60s, that's when things really started to get bad as far as what we're seeing coming out of the artificial intelligence. It actually started taking on like a personality of its own that's more sadistic than anything else, because the
Mhm.
people that programmed it are sadistic. Does that make sense?
Yes, that absolutely makes sense, and I actually agree. And just to add to that, I feel as if humanity has become, or at least that part of humanity, that part that we're talking about, has become so obsessed with trying to figure out extension of life and knowledge of self, as far as like, where do we come from, to the point where they self-destruct on that journey, when it's, the point is you won't find out. Like, it's just there, it's almost as if the human being is kind of programmed, in a sense, to go on that mission of coming back to self, but somehow, somewhere, it got lost. And it's like now it's by any means necessary, instead of just curiosity and journeying to become that wise one who now has the abilities to tap into so many different parts of consciousness, um, understanding life and death cycles, understanding um, wisdom and how powerful that is. Because it's not just about knowledge is so surface based. um, and I it's turned into like a loop of sacrifice, martyrism, overindulgent, because of this obsession with the origin point. I just watched the movie Prometheus, and the way that it ended, I was just like, this is what it is. This is how kind of sick we've
Mm-hmm.
become with journeying to figure things out. It's just an ongoing loop. And once you get to the end game and you realize that it's caused a freaking apocalypse at some
Mm-hmm.
point, then you want to reset, start new somewhere else and do the same thing. It's this weird loop, and it's all about origin point and extended life. And
Yes.
that's basically what was it. And so that's just that's the fuel that keeps us kind of just going. But what we're doing is we're following the same template, the same storyline, the same narrative, and we're slightly we're just kind of changing it slightly, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not making a difference, and we're ending up in the same, situations over and over again. But I don't know. That's just how I feel about that. It's just this obsession, but it's a natural obsession, which is why I feel that we were created by consciousness itself. Because when we come from nothing,
Mm-hmm.
so there's an automatic abandonment issue that we seem to have in the flesh. And I feel like we can't really, it's hard to fathom, as being a fleshy person with spirit, that needs to know who made us or what made us. And it's not really understanding that things are made.
Mm-hmm.
So and so instead of trying to figure out who or what created us, the point of the matter is taking that back and start actually creating instead. But instead, it's been inverted to where we have this obsession about who, what,
Mm-hmm.
who are the gods, who's the creator, what's
Mm-hmm.
going on here, and at least from a mass consciousness point of view, to the point where life doesn't even matter anymore. All that matters is what happened, how did we get here? Life doesn't matter, but the origin matters. So you'll go on that Alice in Wonderlanding it until you get to that point, and then there's more. So it's this weird thing.
Well, getting back to the others, the runners, as you would call them, the people that are running, you trying to get life extension technology, jumping into different simulations to try to find out, okay, well, what if we did this? What if we did that? I think I think all antisocial or erratic or cruel kind of behavior in this matrix results from simulation psychosis. When you're dealing with people that are from outside of it, that have come in, sometimes they go psychotic. They forget that they're supposed to do something here and that they're not supposed to just want to stay here forever. And slowly they start
simulation psychosis.
Yeah, and slowly they start to think that this is the only reality. And so they start telling themselves, oh, well, we better develop life extension technology. We better do this. We better do that. We better marry into certain bloodlines so that we can come back. We better mummify our bodies so that we can come back. That obsession with coming back or staying in this reality when they should want to get out of the reality.
But that's a good point. And I'll add to that as well, Cherie, again. And we were off air. We were talking about Ma'at and the essence of like just how truth in itself operates and cause and effect and all of these natural laws. I kind of feel like these beings, they don't want to die, because if they were to lose out on what they've gained within themselves, as far as like memory and all of that, they don't want to die, because what will happen to them when they let go is a whole other thing. As far as like, you want to talk about quote unquote hell, there's a consequence that comes with everything that they've contributed into the space of consciousness over time. Lack of better terms again, but who's to say that they're avoiding purgatory or hell or a just due for their actions? Like there's an equal amount of like something that they need to go through consciously when not in the body somewhere else. Who's to say that they're literally avoiding the effect from their cause? You
just described why a lot of people refuse to use ayahuasca, by the way. It's the same. It's the same thing. They don't want to face the reality of themselves, Exactly. And Ma'at, I loved your video about Ma'at, by the way.
Thank you.
It was today or yesterday or a few days ago. It was beautiful because it brought to more into light the feelings that I've been having lately about myself, facing things about myself. And I've got Pluto transiting my 12th house, which to any astrologer who knows, that means that I am seeing my faults. I'm seeing my history, and who I am, like front and center. Like usually we're able to avoid it, put it in the back of our minds. But two things that put it right in front of you, like on a billboard, are ayahuasca and Pluto transiting the 12th house. And you have to see that truth in order to change things about yourself. And I agree. I've also wondered lately about hell or purgatory, or can that exist in this matrix? And I'm not real sure.
It would be a simulation.
Yeah.
I think
it would just be another
part of the
pocket
simulation
of reality for them.
Yeah.
Maybe not, just a different pocket of reality.
I've been kicking around an idea What if this simulation in and of itself is a form of life extension? So, for example, we live a finite amount of time. I don't believe this either, but it's just, I have to look at everything from 360 degrees. What better way to extend your life than to be able to go into a machine where you live thousands of lifetimes and only a short amount of time passes in the real world, but then it feels like you're just experiencing things infinitely, for lack of a better term. Could that be the reason for this machine? Something that I just wanted to put out there for people to ponder. But like I said, I don't necessarily go along with that theory. But
I think there are many reasons, and I actually think it's a business. And I think also, as above, so below, in that sense, where there's a migration taking place. We talked about my dream where you sent me in a time capsule to 1492, I believe.
I remember that, yeah.
To Egypt.
Yeah.
So what's coming up is that colonization. The ships are arriving. And I say ships in quotations because I kind of believe, again, that ships, AKA jumping into a simulation, kind of the same thing. It can just be projected as anything. So regardless of the fact, there's two types of immigrants, right? There's the immigrant that we claim to be immigrant when they're really not. Those who are originally from a land and they were forced away from their land, kicked off of their land. And when I see land, I see body as well. It represents the body. So these people, these original or indigenous peoples, kicked off of their land. But then when they come back to their land, now it's America. Let's just use America as an example. They're called immigrants, right? So that's one immigrant status. Then there's the other kind of immigrant who is the colonizer, or is a part of that process of coming in for the milk and honey, the land of opportunity type of immigrant, where it's kind of just like, this is not your land, but you have an opportunity to come through into a portal and experience this land of milk and honey and gold.
That's why we need to build a firewall.
That's
I'm just
funny.
teasing. I'm sorry. I had to throw that in there. Go ahead.
So what I feel is happening is that this is a part of the real estate business, cosmic real estate businesses, where there's a whole fleet of immigrants, like colonizing immigrants, that are coming into this simulation because they have no home, or their home is it's crappy, it's already destroyed. They're kind of like in limbo, and they're coming into this particular place. But here's the catch, and maybe this is just me having a great imagination, but again, it's more so intuitive, is that when they come in, they're disincarnate in a sense. They don't just come in physically. There's a essence that needs a host. So this is what I was talking about with the body snatching, is that it's the immigrants that are coming in for the land of milk and honey, AKA this particular simulation, coming in and actually obtaining hosts. So there's a kind of like a battle of some sort between, hey, this is my land, AKA my body. You're an immigrant, so you're not taking this land. You're not taking this land. And that's why I always make the videos on claiming your identity, holding on to yourself, claiming your seat. Because what I saw just in my mind's eye was musical chairs. And it's really like musical chairs. So you know how you're playing musical chairs and the music goes on and everyone's having a good time, but there's always one less chair. So anytime the music stops, everyone sits in the seat. And there's always that one person who doesn't have a seat. That person might be you if you're not paying attention. So there's this whole musical chair situation going on with bodies. So if you replace the chair with body, this is why two people are not paying attention. And it's like, if you're not using your body, then I might as well take it. I only have a certain amount of time to get one before time is up. So I'm an immigrant. I'm here coming to find a new life in your body. So that's the whole thing. And I don't want to freak anyone out with these theories and all, but it's
no. I've seen this going on over the last couple of years where people, they are in the same body, but they're different people, totally different. Completely characteristics and behavior that's completely different than anything before. So they still have the same identity. It's like they take on the same name, same all of that, but it's just completely different. I'm sure you've noticed this as well, but I've been watching this phenomenon and kind of wondering. But yeah, you know, we've talked about the whole idea of walk-ins as well. And So go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think the difference between a body snatcher situation and a walk-in is the fact that in a body snatcher situation, you've got a perfectly working body that is suddenly, for whatever reason, changed. You know, for it, the personality, the consciousness changes in that person. Whereas with a walk-in, there's usually a leaving of the spirit of the person inhabiting that body first before another consciousness takes over that body. So let's say somebody has an overdose of something. Their body still would work if it weren't for that overdose, but a different consciousness comes into that body and takes over because the other the other spirit has just pretty much left. And it happens quickly. There's actually a show on Netflix about this.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I've talked about this experience before. I was, I don't know, 20 years old, and we had been like on a 5-day bender. And on the 5th day, my nose was bleeding. I was on the bathroom floor. My girlfriend was pounding on the door. Bam, 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 bam. We had taken some Molly on the 5th day, and I was down on the ground, and I didn't even realize what was going on. She's banging in the door. Oh my God, he's dead. He's dead. He's dead. And she starts shaking me, and I look up, and she says, oh my God, are you okay? And I look at her, and I said, I've never felt better in my life. And I get up and I look in the mirror and I'm covered in blood. And it was at that point I realized I need to stop doing what I'm doing right now. And I did. But yeah, that would be the perfect time for this consciousness here that's right now to enter into this body. And I've speculated that may have actually happened. So
absolutely. And I think that some of us here are experiencing integrations of some sort with our, of course, lack of better term, Anunnaki selves. So there's that coming online.
Well, I'm glad you said it, because I've been thinking this the whole time. Those who from heaven came to earth, those who are from outside of the simulation who came into the simulation.
That's exactly what that is. It's not heaven,
right?
Or from the sky. It's from another, like literally outside the simulation.
Yeah. The the Sitchin stuff, it's allegory and it's metaphor. It's metaphor for the creation of the Matrix and how we've been jumping in and out of the Matrix.
Right.
Yes, and understanding that we are the gold that they were mining, like it's
the gold consciousness. That's why the whole thing is, oh, you can get Christ consciousness, you can get gold consciousness, etc., because that's when you're ripe for the plucking right there. But the energy's been messed up, and it's been horribly messed up, and it can't flow anymore.
It's all mixed up because we have this hive thing coming in. I wanted to talk a little bit about that because it's an inversion of the hive in itself. And a lot of people, and I talked about this on another video I did, but there's this, the hive is not a bad thing. The hive in itself sustains and maintains life. When it's in balance and in harmony, where everyone plays their particular role, just like you mentioned the puzzle pieces, Chris, when you were talking about the Set clan wanting to be every puzzle piece instead of playing its part. So it's the same with even with the bees, you know, the queen has her part. She influences the hive. And then everyone does their work based on the influence of the colony. and shit gets done. But what happens is there's an invasion of the colony to the point where who's supposed to be sitting in that seat of influence is now taken away and used instead. And now there's this other set of consciousness, whether it's AI or whatever it is now in that seat. And a lot of, I've referred to Saturn, the influence of Saturn being that queen hive, queen bee, queen matriarchal energy that actually truly influences this particular realm. But it's been overthrown because I made up this scenario on, could you imagine if the drone bees, which would be the male bees, said, fuck this shit. I don't want to be a drone anymore. I want to be a king bee. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to infiltrate the queen. But I have no authority because I don't pollinate. I don't have a stinger. I can't build hives. I can't hunt for food or get food. So I still have to utilize the sister bees and the queen somehow. So I have to use my intellect because I can't physically do it. So I turn the sister bees against each other. We take the queens and we use them to mate. We mate the queens so that they have more bees, sister bees that are arguing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're in the kingdom. Meanwhile, the drone bee is just sitting in the seat of king or false king, and everything goes out of balance because he does not have that authority. So I know when we think of Saturn, we think of Saturn, we think of Santa, we think of Satan, we think of a male essence.
Mm-hmm.
We think of the cube, the hexagon, the
Mm-hmm. influence,
but it's not his. So that's the whole freaking problem. So the hive has turned anyone who controls the hive controls the freaking world.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what's been happening. And there's something about this merging of the minds in that sense where Chris, you were talking about Set, and being that hive mind, is using that power of influence to not create or maintain, but create that disharmony and destructive behavior amongst the people. So I feel like there's a takeover of the mind. Like there's so many things going on because it's almost like the carnival or the market is open. So there's immigrants coming in, there's AI, there's like the families and the elite. Like there's so many different things going on that it's not just one storyline, but the people here within this realm are all like victim of it without even realizing what's going on in all of the different agendas, I should say, of what they want to do with minds and bodies. So yeah, it's a takeover of the influence, and it's been that way for a while, but because the door is wide open, the portal, the CERN turned on, or whatever you want to call it, the door is open. So there's so much coming in, that it's just, this is why people are kind of feeling kind of hazy. They don't understand like which way to go. Because there's a lot of invasion coming in, whether it's the mind and the body or the body. It's very invasive right now. It's an invasive time. So this is why it's like weathering the storm. There's a storm coming. The full storm hasn't come yet, I don't think. But the storm is coming. So you need to like hold on and stay inside yourself until the storm passes. It's kind of like the ark. You have to be your ark during this time because the flood is coming.
The flood is coming.
So it's just another version of apocalypse. It's just it's not in the way that we think. It's like,
that's funny because a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, I actually have written down lyrics and songs that are done.
Yep, synchronicity.
There was a lyric that I just wrote. I've been crucified. I've built an ark. I've seen the beginning and I've seen the end. Anyways, I won't go on about that. But that last song I played, one of the lyrics is Set and Horus sold us out, told us in Atlantis they would wake us when we shut it down. Yeah, I think you really dig those lyrics. Anyways, but no, it's like I've been writing all this stuff that you're talking about right now over the last week or two, and it's very synchronistic.
Okay.
Well, I think that we're on a loop. And it manifests in different ways. And I know that astrologically Saturn, it is all about balance, but if you look at let's just, for instance, put it on a microscopic level compared to the Saturn as this huge planet. Let's look at the way a mother raises a child versus the way a father raises a child. A mother raises a child with gentleness and nurturing and all of those wonderful things that good men in this day and age, they have those qualities. Then there's the father's way of raising a child, which is harsher, it's sterner, it's I'm going to spank you, and that's what Saturn has become astrologically for the entire human species. It's become the rule keeper, and if you break the rules, you're screwed, and I'm going to spank you and throw you in hell and that kind of thing. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about. I don't think Saturn was meant to be that for us.
What's happening, what I just felt right now, you know how all the stories have like the general or the king and the prince and his son, like the son is always like like he's always like carrying his son and making his son do what, take his place and training his son to do certain things, in so many different archetypes and storylines, but mother is never in this picture. And what I feel is when you're running through all of these simulations, I see this figurehead of like this father, this commander, right, who drags his son through the simulations, and he's been dragged through so many different realities that it's been a while since he's been with his mother, and that's the disconnect. You can't take the children away from you can't take the people away from their mothers. So it's lack of maternal nurturing just as a species, like we need it. So they feel that they don't need her. So it's like, no, we have this technology now. We don't need her to, you are who you are, and we can continue living forever as vampires. And it's just like, so it's been a while. And if I feel like this son archetype is longing for his mother, but then his father or his grandfather, I kind of feel grandfather as well.
Yeah, grandfather
kind of like says, no, son, we're toughen up. Like we have work to do. We have
be a man.
Yeah. And then he turns him against his mother.
Yeah.
And I just see that and feel that. So there's this push and pull of because when you jump to simulation to simulation to simulation, and you're still aware, holding on to all of your memories of this, because some of them are most definitely aware. They're not white of memory. That can totally become a trap in a prison for the person's consciousness. And not being over, like, just think of like 2,000, 3,000 years experienced consciously without coming from a womb or being near your mother. It will screw you up. You become psychotic without mother. Humanity becomes psychotic without mother. Period. Point blank.
Yeah. Every child, and I think a lot of the programming that's coming out of the mainstream right now is focusing on, you can, be anything you want. And I think in a way it's good, because, stay-at-home dads are becoming more common and that kind of thing. And they're taking on that role as mother. When you're saying this, it doesn't mean like a masculine versus feminine thing
Mhm.
as far as gender. We're talking about the
No.
spirit. You know, me and Chris did a
Yes.
video a couple of years ago about this and how the feminine aspects of nurturing and caring and empathy and all of that were replaced and just
Mhm.
completely taken over by the other side of the brain, the left side of the brain, which is logic and reason and plundering and pilfering and greed and keeping everything to yourself. It's supposed to be about protection, but
Mhm.
it's mutated into a form of protection for a certain group of people. Getting back to what we were talking about, I think that Chris's album coming up, all of the videos that you're going to be making in the near future at Lucid Living is just going to it's just going to keep expanding and expanding and expanding until it reaches a point where what we're talking about, you've said this before in some of your videos, that the mainstream is catching on to what we're talking about and they're trying
Mhm.
to mimic it and lead people down kind of like Pied Piper type of path
Mm.
directly into the AI instead of away from it or instead of into themselves. Can you
Mhm.
extrapolate on that? And can you also answer the question whether or not Roseanne Barr, when she was talking the other day, did you see that video of Roseanne Barr where she was
I
talking
did,
about
yes.
the AI being in control for at least 700 years? Do you think that that's
Mhm.
part of that mainstream, or do you think that she is actually trying to get out of the system and she wants out of that whole lifestyle?
Well, Roseanne, just her name in general, this is all coming together because I wanted to talk a little bit about the archetypes and the stories that come with the archetypes and the roles that we do play. Whether you believe you're playing a role or not playing a role, you are in essence playing a role. So Roseanne, her name, like Rose Ann, and I was talking about this on another video I did about Lilith and Satan and the spirits using flesh to, it was a whole thing. I don't want to get too deep into that right here, but I was talking about the spirit of Anne. And if you've noticed uh, in a lot of movies, there's a lot of Anne, you know, so you'll see like Marianne or Annabelle or little orphan Annie. Like there's always an Annie or Anne, and she usually has red hair. But there's a spirit of Anne who's an orphaned girl or orphaned woman who's usually on a mission, but usually misunderstood because she just wants to be free of the role that she's been playing. And I feel like a lot of that is showing in Hollywood. And Rose is also connected to Aphrodite, to Venus, to all of like the fertility goddesses and so on. And she, in one of her interviews, they made it a point to show her statue of Venus, the in her like ancient self stature, sitting next to her. And that just confirmed, that was like she's tapping into that rebellious, feminine rebellious spirit right now. So she's breaking out of her programming, which is why she seems a little off. I can tell just by watching her that she's not going crazy, or she's not going into, like, she's breaking out of her programming. So that kind of like that process of breaking out from the outside looks like, oh my God, this person has gone completely wacko.
Right,
She's actually
exactly.
coming more into herself now
Yeah,
than she ever has been.
right.
So she's breaking her role. And as far as like AI ruling for seven, I absolutely believe, I think when we had the last show and we were talking about the BC and AD timeline, I feel like the beginning of the AD timeline represents the beginning of the takeover. And we've been looping in AD ever since.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, So I totally like that resonated,
Yeah.
whether people were thinking she was trolling or not. She's a comedian. She speaks in code. All comedians speak in code.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. I don't know if you've watched the Twilight Zone with the new version with Jordan Peele's point of views.
Mm-hmm.
But the very first episode is about a comedian who tells the truth. It's just like that's what they all do. But they have this way of getting that truth into you through laughter, which actually creates like this whole chemical acceptance of what they're saying. It can be manipulated as well. So a lot of comedians are most definitely bought and owned, like she said, because she even mentioned, I was watching a couple of her interviews after you shared that clip. But she was saying our owners. She kept referring to them or
Mm-hmm.
Hollywood as her owners or their owners.
Yeah.
And I knew what she was saying when she was saying that. And the interviewer couldn't really grasp what she was saying. She was just like, owners of what?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I kind of was just like, Roseanne wants to just say owners of us, you know, but she was just like, you know, those who run the world in America and Hollywood.
Yeah.
So I think she's breaking out of her programming, and which brings me to the conversation that I wanted to talk about, because I know, like, for instance, you...
Can I interrupt for just a second before we get too far off? This was a good segue into a question that the one of the listeners had, and we talked about this off air, but I thought, I don't know how deep you want to go into it. But Hathor, can you speak a little bit about the Hathor energy?
Oh, well, yes. Well, the Hathor, Het is the original name. But Hathor, what was shown to me is that Hathor is an altered version of no, I'm sorry, there's an alter of just goddess in general, or that one feminine archetype has many different alters, and they've all been titled as different individual quote unquote goddesses or identities. And some will say, oh, well, these are just a part or different characters in our subconscious minds. But yes, there's truth to that. But at the same time, their mind control has been around forever. And what I intuitively tapped into was that a lot of the matriarchs of our truly ancient outside of this simulation kind of ancient, the matriarchs of that realm was broken down into different alters of themselves, so that they can never find the pieces to get back together. And ever since then, that those different matriarchs, they've just been on this trip of playing just parts of themselves. And Hathor, how she came to me is she's looked at as the goddess of love, right, in Egyptian mythology. But what I saw was the kind of like the hidden side of that, and a more practical side outside of allegory, is her actually being the sex. What came to me in a dream that I had as well is that she was more of like, you know, the role of like Marilyn Monroe or Anna Nicole Smith, or those types of roles where these women, they kind of snap into a role where they're just used for their bodies and their beauty and their sexuality and sensuality. That being an alter, because Marilyn Monroe, Anna Nicole, they've all gone through that mind control.
Right.
So that is a Hathor program. It's an Hathor program. So it's a piece or an alternate version of the whole of the actual matriarch that holds that space, but has been separated from herself through MK Ultra programming. So when you're tapping into, for those of you who tap into or deify some of these thought forms, archetypes, spirits, whatever you want to call them, understand, or at least from my perspective, not pushing this on anyone, that you may be tapping into an altar that was specifically programmed to do a very specific thing. So for instance, and this changes the game, and I know there are a lot of people who follow mythologies by the book. And so it's like, oh, that's disrespectful to say such a thing, but we're here to change the narratives because it's enough is enough. So Sekhmet and Hathor are one and the same. So it's like Sekhmet is also like a version that there's a trigger that turns Sekhmet into Sekhmet. And even in the mythologies, when Ra sent Sekhmet off to kill those who weren't abiding by the order of Ma'at, and she was just enraged, and they had to trick her with wine so that she thought she was drinking blood instead, to stop her from killing everyone, even though she was ordered to. You kind of, when you take the mythology out of it, you kind of go into like, Sekhmet sounds like a military op. Like she's just
taking an order.
But we deify and we create these, and so but these thought forms are very quote unquote real as well at the same time, because they've lived long enough as themselves to be independent. So that's the thing. So when people say I connect to Sekhmet, Sekhmet protects me and she comes, there's an actual, yes, you are tapping into that particular thought form who is her own being in person. That's just what happens to consciousness in itself. We have many different characters living inside of us. And for instance, when we pay more attention to one particular character over the other, that one particular character takes form more and actually thrives off of your attention. And that's where the whole concept of the gods came from anyway, is that we worship or deify these spirits or thought forms long enough to the point where now they're bidding for our attention to keep living. So they're like in other worlds without bodies. And in order for them to kind of like American gods, in order for them to still remain relevant, there needs to be a song and dance kind of done to get your attention, for you to worship or pay attention to them so that they can continue living on. Because the more you forget about a thought form, the less and less it becomes and the weaker it becomes to eventually disappearing. And that was reflected in like a animated film called Coco about the ancestor who was forgotten about. And if you haven't watched that, you guys have to watch that, because the whole Set and Asar or Osiris saga is in that.
Oh wow, really?
Yes.
What's it called again?
Coco. Okay. It's an animated Disney film, of course.
Okay.
That is true.
Yeah.
That's what I've said, is that these are locked aspects of our consciousness that we unlock. And that was my journey through the ayahuasca, was unlocking every piece of this consciousness. And then when they all became unlocked, then it became raw, R-A and R-A-W. But it was like, unlocking hidden parts of ourselves. The protector energy of Sekhmet, we utilized that in the pyramid when
firewall.
We created the firewall around the sarcophagus before creating the portal, so nothing else can come in with us. But we named our kitties, obviously, Sekhmet and Bastet. And I feel that it's just created a protective barrier around the house because we're invoking those names now. But you're right, though, it's not a worship kind of thing. And that's what people need to understand, is these are parts of ourselves. They're not things to be worshiped. They're things to be understood.
Yeah. Understood and invoked from within.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So Hathor is the most manipulated.
Yeah.
Is the most manipulated consciousness, whether it's through Venus, she's just in that frequency. That thought form is in that frequency, used by the upside down version of masculinity that takes her in and turns her into the quote unquote harlot for their agenda. So there's this whole storyline. And the thing is, why I feel we're here And I know that you two, even though you haven't necessarily revealed, and you spoke about this with your viewers, but you two resonate with specific archetypes, a dominant archetype. We have all the others, but there's a dominant that we carry.
Mm-hmm.
So what I wanted to put this out there is that your dominant archetype is the role that you take on, that eventually you end up taking on, or what can happen is you end up taking on that character's actual storyline, and it starts to play out and leak into your life. So you have it when you, like, you know, my name being on set and, you know, all of that, there's a lot of stuff that's happened to that character or that essence that is totally reflected in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm realizing is that I am here to help change the narrative of the roles, because what I'm getting from these spirits, these thought forms, is that they're tired of playing the same old roles. There are other ways that they can utilize their essence, and they kind of want to, like, it's like being on Broadway for like thousands of years.
It's funny, when we were in Egypt, one of the people that we were with was a follower of Set. And when I was talking about Set, he said, well, no, Set's misunderstood. He said he just got tired of playing the bad guy.
Yeah.
He wants to play something else. So it's funny that you say this, because that's exactly what he said about Set.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, that's interesting, because, you know, I think a lot of us, if we really look at our lives and the way things have transpired, they've transpired along the same kinds of attributes as these characters. And it's those lives where those stick out more than any other archetypes that we need to pay close attention to, because it means that we have a specific job here that goes along that same lines of what that character does.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
And again, if you read the story of your particular archetype that you've adapted and embodied, look at the storyline. And if there are some things that you see coming in that mythology that you don't want happening to you, you need to take over the story. And that's the thing, because a lot of people are even turning themselves into martyrs, not even realizing that they're becoming martyrs, even aspects of self-sacrifice, because they're associating or embodying them. They're embodying this role of an actual, like, Yeshua, Jesus type kind of character.
I was just about to say, you know, a lot of people think that they're Jesus, or that they're the Savior, or they have this Christ Jesus consciousness. Fate. Right, exactly.
And we all know what that fate is. So if they're really feeling that essence, maybe they need to say, you know what? Maybe I want to play this role, but I don't think I want to be the sacrifice anymore.
Right. And
you know,
that speaks also to astronomy and astrology, where what you were talking about with Venus and Hathor. Did you know that a couple, like 300 million years ago, they're saying that Venus, for 3 billion years, Venus was able to support life. And it's only been in the last 300 million years that it's become this wasteland of heat and humidity, and it's too hot to land on, and it's awful. And each day lasts like 1,400 hours or something like that. It's a horrible place now, but originally it could have harbored life. For 3 billion years, it could have harbored life. You know, and considering that they say that life on Earth began only 4 billion years ago, that's really not. That's as long as we've been here. You know, that life has been on this planet.
They've literally overheated Venus. They've gotten her hot and bothered to the point where it's become way too imbalanced, and she's like on fire, literally. And when you think about even Earth, this realm of Earth, or this plane of Earth would be considered the heart. Now you can see the storyline of AI taking over because AI is minus the heart. So there's no emotion with an AI. So this is the main story for Earth because of that. So they take it, just like even with Mars. Mars was once terraformed, right? So they claim, speaking in their terms, in their lingo. But now Mars is the war planet, right? But look at Mars as being barren and just deserted, and all of that. It's just kind of like, no wonder he's upset. Now he's kind of left that way, and now he's the war person, so
Right,
it's like
right.
so it's like they turn these archetypes or these influences and these planes that are actual realms of living, they turn them into an imbalanced state, and then they keep it moving. And the days that we're talking about seems to be only, it makes sense that it's the artificial intelligence that kind of runs through and ramshacks every single plane of existence, and eventually turns it upside down, and then keeps it moving. It's just an ongoing.
Right. And you notice that we're right between Venus and Mars. Like the Earth is between the two, the masculine and the feminine. And it's almost like the AI, since it's taken over to Earth, it's gotten between the masculine and the feminine. It's divided them. It's separated them. It's kept them from being able to harbor life. In other words, metaphorically, I'm saying that, the AI, its main thing really is keeping the masculine and the feminine aspects of oneself from being able to merge in a healthy way and be balanced in a healthy way. And so you see Mars also used to harbor life, even more recently than Venus. And it could still harbor life to a certain extent. But it's a cold, barren place. And like you said, it's the god of war. Men that are so involved with warlike mindsets that, they're fighting men, they don't think about love and gentleness and the female kind of aspects as much. And I think that's what's happened to Mars and Venus, and it's playing itself out metaphorically here because we feel it.
Because the planets, again, they're inside of us. There are chakras, and so it's the same, again, externally, internally. It's just a reflection. So I wouldn't get too caught up in, that out there and me here. It's just all playing out. The whole entire storyline is playing out inside of our body, in our minds. So it's it's really deep. With this whole storyline narrative thing. So even when you start to get discouraged, and Chris, I hear you say a lot that you ready to leave the simulation. It's just like, Chris, remember, you came here for a reason.
Oh yeah, no, I'm going to finish that reason. It's just I'm almost done. It's been 12,000 long years.
Okay.
I'm almost finished. That's the thing. I'm not going anywhere until it's done. But it's when we at the pyramid. I mean, I know people can't understand this, but it was 12,000 years of work that went into doing that, and we finally did it. Yeah. That was a huge step. I hope the next step isn't another 12,000 years, though. I don't know if I can do it.
Here's the thing that I want to hint to your audience specifically. It's more of like, I know we get caught up in the technicals of how this thing operates, but we have to also remember to live our lives. We have to remember to also play the game, but in essence, creating your own way of doing it, like navigating through what's already set up and going rogue if needed, but still playing or participating, because that's also what leaves a person vulnerable for any kind of, whether it's psychic attack, body snatching, consciousness takeover, whatever that is. People are more susceptible to that when they're so occupied in the mental plane about figuring out life instead of living it. So it's more of like, you actually, you have to kind of animate your storyline. And again, the logic is, if you're not going to do it, then let somebody else take over and do it, because, you're kind of just sitting around, just, again, off in the astrals or off in the mental plane and not remembering to integrate into your human experience, because that's the main thing. This is how we get things done here in this plane. So let's not get lost in trying to figure out the truth. Now, it's important, but it's not the only thing. That's the whole imbalance that turns you upside down. It gets you into a spiritual depression. Then you're just like, oh, fuck the simulation. And then you're just like in your basement hiding out. And it's just like, no, don't do that.
That's a good point.
You know?
No, I'm glad you raised that point, because that's a lot of people, they use it. You know, I found in my journey that I was always looking for some kind of apocalyptic event or something like that, because I didn't want to fix my own life. And my message lately has been, you've got to take control of your life, find the power from within yourself, and then live well. That's what it's all about. Regardless of whether the machine's shutting down or not, we've got to live well in the time that we have right now. And some people have gotten angry about that message. And they're like, well, whoa, wait a minute. I thought you said we were shutting it down and we're all leaving from here. Well, yeah, but it's going to take some time. So, you know. And,
so while you're here.
Right, exactly. So I found myself clarifying that more often than not lately. Is we've got to live well.
Yeah, and it's not easy when you've already pierced the veil. It's not that easy. It's not simple to just go back to like da 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 da. It's just so it's work to stay centered in knowing what you know, but also like living your life with people. So,
if I could go back to sleep, I'd hang myself with my tie.
That was one of his lyrics, from his first album.
Yeah. We have a great question here from, it was the one that asked the question earlier. I can't find her comment here. But it was, here it is, Casey. So
Casey's question.
For Osset, when you're talking about how mutable the energy of Hathor is, do you associate that energy with the role of the mother? And how does the aspect of motherhood relate to the karmic consequence of reincarnation in the Matrix? I want to comment on this really quick, and then I want to give it to you, both of you, because obviously y'all can answer this better than I can. But when Hathor always reminded me of the grandmother, which is like you're bringing a different perspective to the table than what I've understood Hathor to be, but it's the perspective like that we hear about in the mythology as well. And so I may be wrong in my assessment of that, but as far as children go, in my particular path, I feel that it's not really a karmic tie, but it's just it's another thing. It's another reason of why, another reason to come back into the Matrix. Like, oh, well, I want to come back because I've got a bloodline here. So in my particular journey, I've cut that off, and I'm like, no, I'm not having any kids at all, period. But that's not the same for everybody. So do you want to take that?
I mean, I think you answered that perfectly. You said it's not everybody's journey. Some people are just like, I'm done. And then there's more work to do. So there's more children to have and more generations to continue on with passing down, because what a lot of us are doing is we're cleansing our bloodlines through changing the narrative, through kind of breaking the quote unquote curses of, the family curse. There are a lot of us who are the custodians of that. And having children sometimes actually helps with that healing of an entire bloodline,
right?
Because it's a quantum healing. So when you heal wholeheartedly, and not only are you healing forward, but you're healing backwards as well. So if I'm healed and in a sense where it's like there's a heavy trauma that's been dispersed, and I have my child through that, there's that child, my child grows into herself or into himself, and doesn't carry that burden any longer. So also on a quantum level at the same time, all of your ancient ancestors are also experiencing that quantum healing. So you're kind of like changing the past by creating a whole new future, because I don't, there is no backwards actually. It's more of like, when I even think of the ancients, I think of them being in the future, because there's only the future and then there's right now. What's happened is a memory. So it's even when you time travel, you're to travel in the past, you're still moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not going backward, even though if I'm going in 1960, right now, there's still forward movement to 1960. So it's like it's
Oh, that's actually a good point. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah. So our ancestors are actually ahead of us, but we see them as a memory behind us, because they are us. So it's just like it's a domino effect forward, but more so in a circle because it's not linear. So even if I were to draw a circle, there's a point on the circle where you were up, but then now when you're moving, you're down. So then there's a part of you that you passed that eventually becomes ahead of you, if that makes any sense.
That explains so well why I'm obsessed with creating timelines for things. That explains it completely, 100%. I'm studying the future. But you know, your answer to that question was very much more detailed and mystical than mine, which is that I think sometimes in order to present a soul into this matrix in a certain set of circumstances and a certain you're creating the future, like you said. And so you even though you're here for a different mission, you're also here to provide this reality with another person that is going to change something in the future that needs to be changed. Because since it's a simulation, we probably already came in here knowing exactly what we were going to do, how we were going to do it, how everything was going to be playing out. And I think sometimes we have children. You know, me and you are both mothers. I think I had a child personally because he's necessary for some kind of mission in the future. I think that also it awakens something inside of you when you have a child. Just the first time holding them, I know a lot of people are, you know, it's like Hallmark moments where, you know, you are crying and everything, but it's deeper than that. It's it changes your consciousness for eternity.
Well said. Let me jump in for a second. Alan is in the house. How are you doing, brother? He just
hey, Alan.
Yeah, sent some love. And I've been thinking about you for the last week, and I've been meaning to call you. I've just been like so deep in the music, but I think the music is going to tie into the thing we were talking about. So we'll talk about it when I give you a call. But man, thank you. Yeah, definitely. But go ahead, Sheree.
Oh no, I was pretty much finished. You know, I mean, it changed. Motherhood, especially, changes your consciousness.
Yes,
for the rest of that incarnation. For that, and it for a lot of people, especially people who grow up in a lot of mind control, they grow up in a lot of programming. It glitches some of that programming, some of that AI programming, and you see a lot of mothers and fathers that, you know, they love their kids, quote unquote, but at the same time they inject them with poison. They do all kinds of, you know, things that if they were acting as a, you know, as an activated consciousness, they would think twice before doing that, and they would not do that. They would make different decisions and things like that, and they protect their children so fiercely that it's you can tell it's changed their consciousness just having a child. So you know, it's not as mystical as what you were saying, but that's what. Yeah, I think that's why people that are organic consciousness or even programmers bring children into this reality.
Absolutely. And the whole mystical thing, it keeps me grounded to go that route, because I think even when we have these conversations about simulated realities, people kind of have this disappointment as, oh, does that mean my life is not real? Does that mean spirit is not real? Does that mean I'm not real? And that's a very natural way to react to some of these truths that we're waking up into. So it's just understanding that the replica is still the replicated aspect of nature in itself, or creation itself, is it's just as real as it was or is from the very beginning of its very genesis of its creation in itself. So it's basically like a seed. We have like lots of fruits. The seed in itself holds all of the, it's a condensed version of the whole. So basically these technologies, we're still so far back in technology that we still think of tech as robotic or very hardware-ish, non-human like. But when we get past that point, or when we have gotten past that point, you're getting now into quantum technology, which is manipulating nature in a sense, and being able to take the smallest of the small that holds the blueprint to everything, and taking data itself, information, and merging the two and creating worlds from that. And those worlds in itself, whatever real, I hate that word real, because it's just like, first of all, when you're auditioning as an actor, you have to have a reel, right? REEL. So it tells you exactly what real really is. It's just like a fucking movie. It's what's playing out in your experience, in your consciousness. On a physical level, all of this is projected from our minds anyway. So anywhere we go, as long as we're observing it, we're going to see it as real. Period, point blank. So I wouldn't get so caught up in, oh, this is digital. It's more, it's quantum.
That's a good point.
That is.
I think this kind of plays into astrology, in my opinion, because free will is an illusion. Unless you realize that free will is an illusion, then you can actually take control of your destiny or your dharma or your path. And I found myself being a slave to the stars more often than not, unless I realize what the stars are up to. Then I can break those patterns. But we're all bound to this movie, this movie that's just being projected in front of us. Until we realize that it's a movie, then we can start navigating ourselves.
Exactly. Then transcend it, and you can have all the fun, because you become the director, the producer, the creator, the writer, and the actor all at the same time.
It's beautiful. It is.
Dope.
It is really beautiful. I love doing astrology.
And that's a wrap. That time is coming soon, for me anyways. So is there anything we haven't covered, Asit? Because this has been awesome.
No, I think we're good. I just, the SOS, or not necessarily SOS, but the thing to be aware of, I think, just in the current atmosphere of things, is that there are other energies that are coming into this space, whether you want to call them ETs or whatever. There are things coming into our space. They're here, but more are coming. So just be aware of that, and especially around Halloween time. Around that time, just Halloween in itself is just a mockery of what happens with switching and taking a role that is not. So, for instance, and I don't want to ruin Halloween for anyone, but it's kind of like,
boys and girls of every age. It is my favoriteest time in the world.
Yes, but you can continue to love it. Just be aware, like you said, Chris, just be aware of it. So, for instance, Joker's like a popular character now because the movie just came out. So there are a lot of people who are going to do the Joker costumes. I already saw some online. So, for instance, when you are a Joker for Halloween, you are literally allowing that essence of the Joker, which is a very real essence, to ride your body for the night. If you're dressed as Marilyn Monroe, the spirit of Marilyn Monroe gets to be you. So it's like you're wearing Marilyn, but she's also wearing you. So just be aware of that when you are interacting with these energies, when you're around people, when you're wearing your costumes, and maybe you can just kind of cut that off and just create your own thing and how you're deciding to wear this costume more so because that's what Halloween kind of really is. It's an opportunity for the dead or the essences or the spirits or the disincarnates or whatever, or the thought forms to have free rides all night. That's what Halloween is.
That's a good point. I never thought about that.
I just wanted to put that out there because it's coming up. So just be aware, have fun, live your life, and continue to awaken.